start out today by talking about King George III's reaction to Bunker Hill when he gets words of what's going on in the colonies, especially Massachusetts. So the King's reaction to Bunker Hill. Well, your reaction, when I said we were going to talk about the King's reaction, was about the same as his. He was shocked at the news, and because of what he considered rebel behavior, he did the following two things immediately. So, King George III was shocked at the news of the actions of the American colonists in Massachusetts. He considered their acts rebellious or rebel acts, and he proceeded to do the following. First thing he did is he ordered the British Royal Navy to begin a tight naval blockade and close off all shipping in and out of the colonies. Okay? He ordered the British Royal Navy to begin a tight naval blockade to close off all shipping to the colonies in or out. He orders the British Royal Navy to begin a tight naval blockade to close off all shipping to the colonies. Anybody know what that word means? Because it has to do with the second thing he did. What's that word?
Mercenaries.
What are mercenaries? What's that?
Guns for hire.
Kind of, but mercenaries specifically are soldiers for hire. Okay? So some people's profession in life is to be a soldier. That's what they do. And then there's no war, and they're kind of going, oh my God, what am I going to do? So the second thing that King George III did is he hired mercenaries. 10,000 soldiers from the German state of Hesse, called Hessians, to fight and subdue the Americans. And those are on your ID sheet. So he basically hired mercenaries. He hired 10,000 soldiers from the German state of Hesse, called Hessians, to help fight and subdue the Americans. So he hired some hired guns, so to speak.
Is Hess just H-E-S-H?
It's on your ID sheet. Okay? He hired 10,000 soldiers from the German state of Hesse, called Hessians, to help fight and subdue the Americans. So those are the two things he did. He ordered the British Royal Navy to begin a tight naval blockade to close off all shipping to the colonies in and out. And then he hired mercenaries, or 10,000 soldiers from the German state of Hesse, called Hessians, to help fight and subdue the Americans. They will come up in the Revolutionary War later. Well, in response to that, the American colonists also took some actions. So in response to King George III's actions, the American colonists also take action. And they do two things. Now, what was one thing that Patrick Henry suggested in his rant about give me liberty or give me death, that maybe they would do in reaction to this particular move? What do you think? Not yet. What else might they do? That he called for independence. He called. Very good. What the Second Continental Congress did is they sent diplomatic agents to France, Spain, and the Netherlands to request aid to help them in this fight against Great Britain. So in response to the King's response to Bunker Hill, the American colonists also took actions, and the first thing they did is the Second Continental Congress sent diplomatic agents to request aid from France, Spain, and the Netherlands. Very good, Dom. Yep, very good. Now, if you were George Washington and the Continental Army, where may you think would be the most vulnerable now that the king is mad at you? What area? What area do you think would be the target now that the king is most angry at you? what geographic region or specific place do you think would be maybe under siege because of the actions of Breeds or Bunker Hill? Where would they be hitting at?
Boston.
Boston, absolutely, Boston. So the second action the Americans took is George Washington took his newly formed Continental Army and he moved in and occupied an area known as Dorchester Heights, which was an area that overlooked both Boston and Boston Harbor. So the second action the Americans took is George Washington took his newly formed Continental Army and he moved in and occupied an area known as Dorchester Heights, which is on your ID sheet, which was an area that overlooked both Boston and Boston Harbor, because they anticipated if the British were going to strike, that's where they would strike. So the two actions the Americans took after the actions of King George III and his reaction to Breeds or Bunker Hill is the Second Continental Congress sent diplomatic agents to request aid from France, Spain, and the Netherlands, and George Washington took his Continental Army and moved in and occupied an area known as Dorchester Heights, which was an area that overlooked both Boston and Boston Harbor, because they felt the British probably that would be their next move. Well, in the meantime, the British have a change in command. Who is command of the British forces in the colonies right now? General Thomas Gage. He is replaced with British General Sir William Howe. So it will be Sir William Howe's decision on whether he makes a run at Boston or not. So General Thomas Gage is replaced at this time by another British general by the name of Sir William Howe. And it will be his decision to see if he wants to try to hold Boston and Boston Harbor or not. Okay? So we have a change in leadership in the British military in the colonies. British General Thomas Gage is replaced by British General Sir William Howe. And it will be his decision on what he wants to do concerning Boston. Okay? Well, he makes a decision that probably was wise. He decides it's useless to try to hold the city any longer, so the British fleet sails out of Boston Harbor on March 17, 1776. So British General Sir William Howe, who replaced General Gage as commanding officer, decides it would be useless to try and hold Boston any longer, and as a result of that, on March 17 of 1776, the British fleet sails out of Boston Harbor. What's on those British ships?
British soldiers.
And, very good, and, what?
Loyal.
Very good, about 1,000 loyalists that are going, my God, this is getting crazy, I'm going to go back to Britain. You know what I mean? So about 1,000 loyalists, American colonists that are loyalists, and the British soldiers board these British fleet, and they sail out of Boston Harbor on March 17, 1776. So, we're going to now wait and see what happens back in Boston later, okay, after Declaration of Independence is declared. So that's going to take us to an interesting little battle called the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge. The Battle of Moores Creek Bridge. I thought all the fighting in Boston was over. Now we're going to have a Battle of Moores Creek Bridge. What's that tell you, Wyatt? Why? I mean, if all the fighting in the north is over and we're going to have a Battle of Moores Creek Bridge, what's it tell you? We're going to have, what? We're going to have our first battle where?
South.
Out of Massachusetts and in the south. Yeah, in the south. So during this time that they're having all the troubles in Boston and the Battle of Breeds or Bunker Hill, etc., back in the southern part of the American colonies, the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge is going to be fought in what we know today as North Carolina. North Carolina. And this would be considered, where's kind of the borderline between North and South? Virginia, right? So here's North Carolina. So during the time that they're having this trouble up in the north, we're going to have another battle fought, the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge. And being it's the first battle fought in the south, what do we sometimes refer to the battle as?
Lexington and Concord of the South.
What?
Lexington.
The Lexington and Concord of the South. First battle in the south. What was the first battle in the north? Lexington and Concord. So this battle is often referred to in American history as the Lexington and Concord of the South. Now this was kind of interesting how this whole thing went out. Bear with me a minute. The governor of North Carolina was a loyalist. He wanted no part of any separation from Great Britain. And he began to hear that maybe some of the citizens of North Carolina were starting to seize against the king. And so his goal in life was to ensure that all the people in North Carolina stayed loyal to the crown. That was his goal in life. And he was hearing rumors that there was a group of rebels in North Carolina that weren't interested in staying loyal to the king. So what he did is he recruited about 2,000 loyalists. Okay? He recruited about 2,000 loyalists from North Carolina, basically put together a loyalist militia, the governor did. The governor of North Carolina, I don't care. Yeah, the governor of North Carolina, who wanted to keep North Carolina loyal to England, recruited nearly 2,000 loyalists from the colony, basically put together a loyalist militia, and he planned a march on 2 towns in North Carolina, Wilmington and Brunswick. Okay? So backing up again, in the South, the governor of North Carolina, who is a die-hard loyalist, does not want any part of separation from Great Britain, starts to hear rumors that some of the colonists in his colony are uprising against the king. And to ensure that the entire colony stays loyal to Great Britain, he rounds up about 2,000 loyalists and basically puts together a loyalist militia. And he's going to march that militia to 2 towns in North Carolina, Wilmington and Brunswick. Now, the idea behind the governor's plan is once they get to Brunswick, the loyalists are going to be joined by British soldiers with the intention of taking anyone in North Carolina that's not loyal to the king and convincing them that would be the best thing to do, whatever it took, right? So, again, the governor's sending 2,000 loyalists, a militia, to first Wilmington and then to Brunswick. And when they get to Brunswick, the plan is they are going to be joined by British soldiers, and then they as a group are going to make sure that those citizens of North Carolina that are rebelling against the king and England are put in their place and straightened up, so to speak. Well, it's kind of interesting because the Patriots have this incredible spy network. I mean, they just have so many people out there keeping an eye on what's going on. They know about the plan unbeknownst to the governor of North Carolina. They know that they're planning this whole thing. Okay? So these Patriots have this spy network out, and they're fully aware of the plan that the governor of North Carolina has. So a fellow by the name of James Moore stations approximately 1,100 Patriots at Moore's Creek Bridge waiting for these 2,000 loyalists. So obviously Moore's Creek Bridge is on the way to where? Wilmington and Brunswick, right? So he's ahead of the game, and this James Moore, this patriot, organizes about 1,000 other patriots, and they set up at Moore's Creek Bridge waiting for these 2,000 loyalists to get there. What's James Moore's plan here? If you think about it, what's he going to do? Why is he waiting at this bridge for him? Yeah, he's going to make sure that those 2,000 loyalists do not get to Brunswick and do what? Team up with those British soldiers, right? That's his plan. So as crazy as this sounds, and maybe how elementary it sounds, what James Moore's men did at that bridge is they tore up the planking from the bridge, and they greased the log supports with tallow and soap. So you have your bridge here, okay, and here's your log supports, and they have these, what are these called?
Planks.
Planks. And so they rip off all these planks, and obviously the bridge must be over the top of something fairly deep, otherwise they just walk around, right? Okay? and they tear all the planks off of here, and they grease up the log supports with soap and tallow. Well, on February 27th of 1776, just as the sun is rising, the Loyalists reach this bridge, and they're pretty tired. As a matter of fact, they're exhausted because what have they been doing all night? Marching, not sleeping. So, on the early morning, just as the sun is rising, on February 27th of 1776, these Loyalists reach this bridge, and they are exhausted from marching all night. Well, where do you think these patriots are, Elizabeth, while they're approaching this bridge? Did they just take off and say, oh, they'll just slip and fall in the ravine? They're all around, hid around that bridge. And as those Loyalists attempt to cross the bridge on those slippery logs, they are met by repeated fire from the patriots that were located in the brush on the opposite side. Okay? So, everybody picking that up? Randy, you got a question here?
You said
Yeah.
Before he says something about Mark.
yeah, that's why I'm confused.
Oh.
You said March 17th.
I did?
Yeah, when we were talking about the bridge fleet leaves Boston.
Yeah, but so we're backing up. I said while this stuff is going on,
Oh,
this is happening in the south.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're not in,
This is going on.
yeah, we're not necessarily, very good question, we're not necessarily in chronological order here, Matt. So as this other stuff is going on in Boston, this is going on in the south, okay? All right, well, keeping track here, on February 27th of 1776, just as the sun was rising, the Loyalists reached the bridge, exhausted from marching all night, and as they attempt to cross the bridge on the slippery logs, they are met by repeated fire from the patriots that are located in the brush on the opposite bank. Well, this is a very short fight, and the patriots win a decisive victory in this battle. Okay, they win a decisive victory in this battle. And James Moore and his men take three key things from these Loyalists. They take three key things from these Loyalists. Obviously, they probably take what? Their weapons. They take their weapons. They also take 850 prisoners of war, I guess you could call them. But they take over 850 prisoners of the 2,000. They take their weapons. And I don't know why, but they had a large supply of gold with them, which the Patriots took as well. So it was financially prosperous for them, in addition to everything else. Well, you know, I don't know if they were, I just don't know the story behind that, what they were taking gold for, if they're taking it to give to the British, you know, for their help, I just don't know, okay? Well, as far as Patriot losses in the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge, 1 man was killed and 1 man was wounded, so pretty minimal. Of course, when you're firing from behind brush, and you know, your chances of having heavy casualties aren't that good. So 1 Patriot was killed and 1 was wounded. So, do the British soldiers still arrive at Brunswick? Well, sure they do, because there's no reason for them not to. And when they get there, what do they find? No Loyalists. So what do? Assume the thing is over, and they simply depart. So the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge really shattered the British plans and the governor of North Carolina's plans to keep the entire colony loyal to Great Britain. The point of the whole story is that we're starting to see fighting other places other than the North, and especially Massachusetts. Because Brianna makes a good point, this happened during the time that other things were happening up north, okay? So it's starting to feather down. All right, well, that'll take us to our next subtopic, which is pretty important. The colonists decide officially to declare their independence. The colonists decide to declare their independence. Now, I want you to think about this. This is kind of I like this part. Even though we've had bloodshed in Massachusetts, even though we've had what some consider tyranny in North Carolina, trying to force people one way or the other, there are several reasons why American colonists would be really cautious about a war with Great Britain. I'm going to give you about 5. 5 reasons why, even though we understand things aren't perfect, why we might be cautious or why we might be concerned about actually going to war with the mother country. Okay, so even though you get it, right, you're still thinking, geez, this is a very good idea. Now, I'm going to give you 5 reasons why there were American colonists that were very cautious about a war with Great Britain, even if they supported the Patriot cause. They're thinking to themselves, geez, do we really want to do this? Well, first of all, many were reluctant to make a final break from Great Britain. Many colonists were reluctant to make a final break from Great Britain. Now, let me give you an example. It's probably poor, but it's the one I'm thinking of. So one of these days, Talon Anderson is going to graduate from high school, and she's going to pick some place to go to college. And even though she doesn't like everything her parents tell her to do, and doggone it, I had to be in at 10:30 tonight, or whatever the rules are, you're thinking, I can hardly wait to get to college and get away from these parents. I'm not saying your parents like, but I can hardly wait to get away from my parents and get on my own. I'm tired of them telling me what to do. But what happens once you get to college? Oh, you miss your parents even though they were kind of tyrants, and oh darn it, you're cooked. You know, the food you're having at college isn't as good as that what your mom cooks, and doggone it, I kind of miss my hometown a little bit. So what do? You come back home even though you were dying to get out of the house to go to college. Well, these colonists might be dying to get away from Great Britain, but in the end, they're thinking, it wasn't maybe that bad. If we go on our own, maybe it wasn't that bad. So they kind of have the college philosophy of they really want maybe to be independent, but they really don't. You know what I mean? The second reason is, was there law and order and stability in the colonies? Absolutely. So all of a sudden people are thinking, gee whiz, if we go on our own and win this war, are we going to have the same type of law? And what kind of law and order, or what kind of stability?